Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So as much fun as it is to predict who's going to win the President's Trophy, who's going to win the Stanley Cup, who is going to be the best team in the NHL, for a sicko like me, it is almost equally as fun to predict who's going to be the worst team in a given season. The tank wars for whatever top prospect is available, who is going to be the worst team in a given season. So today I wanted to do a fun little exercise and look at over the next decade, who's going to be the worst team in the NHL each season? What are the cycles of certain rebuilds going to be based on what teams' certain directions are? How many more years left do their cores have? Do I think their rebuilds are going to be successful, or are they going to be right back where they are right now in 5 or 6 years? So we're going to go through this right now, starting in 2025 all the way to 2034. So let's get into it. Up first for 2025, I've already said it multiple times, but I still think the San Jose Sharks are the worst team in the NHL. Are they going to be a 47-point team, one of the worst teams of the 21st century? No, not likely, considering they went out and spent some money on guys like Tyler Toffoli, got Jake Wallman, Alex Wenberg, Celebrini, and Smith should be impact guys day one, but this is still a 65-point team, which is a massive upgrade compared to 47 points last year. I think it's probably between them and the Chicago Blackhawks, who also will be much improved in terms of who the worst team in the NHL is, and rightfully so. The San Jose Sharks are definitely still rebuilding. I think the following season, the 2025-2026 season, if they're still 65 points, then something's going wrong. But next year, the expectation is probably to be a bottom 2 team in the NHL. Yet again, lock up another top 4 pick, and then you have all your pieces to go out and rebuild the proper way. They have a fantastic future, and next year sucking is a part of that future. In 2026, I got the Calgary Flames. I think right now the Flames are really the only team that is just now entering a rebuild, if that makes sense. There's a lot of teams coming out like Chicago Blackhawks, San Jose Sharks, Columbus Blue Jet. Columbus has kind of been rebuilding the last decade for the most part, or last 5 years. But Montreal is coming out of their rebuild. Utah is coming out of their rebuild. There's a lot of teams on the up and up, but Calgary is just now entering it, and after having 81 points this year, they sold so heavily at the deadline. I thought maybe they were going to try to be a competitive team next year, but their only big signing was Anthony Mantha on a 1-year deal. They're just going to trade him at the deadline. So I think when looking at it, they're only going to sell more during this season. I don't expect this to be like a 1-year, get a top 5 pick, and then be aggressive as hell heading into next offseason. So I think they're going to stink in 2026, and then in 2027, I also have the Calgary Flames. I don't know who else will kind of stink by 2027. Any team that blows it up middle of next season probably won't be as bad as Calgary is right now come the 2026, 2027 season. And when looking at their best players, right, some of their best players right now aren't even that young. Nazem Kadri in 2 years probably won't be that good. Jonathan Huberdeau already stinks and is only going to get worse. Well, stinks compared to his contract, as well as Mikael Backlund. So unless Connor Zary, Martin Pospisil, Matt Coronado, some of their young guys really hit by the 2026-2027 season, they're shaping up to be the worst team in the NHL in terms of 2026 and 2027. But in 2028, we switch it up. We got a different team. I'm not going with the Calgary Flames being the worst team in the NHL for 3 straight seasons. I am going to go with the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins in, what would this be, 3 or 4 seasons from now? Crosby will probably still be a high-level player, but no longer the top 10 player in the NHL. Evgeny Malkin, we're already seeing him somewhat regress. Chris Letang took a step back this season. Erik Karlsson, I still think is very good, but again, he's 33, 34. So in 3 to 4 years, this Pittsburgh Penguins team is probably going to be entering a pretty heavy rebuild. They'll probably somehow get Gavin McKenna, Landon DuPont, somehow in the 2026, 2027. But I think by 2028, it's probably going to be their lowest point in terms of their current guys just not being what they once were. And we've seen them take steps back in the last 2 seasons. So I think by 2028, the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be a pretty goddamn bad hockey team, but again, knowing them, they're probably going to find a way out of it, just like how they did in the mid-2000s, getting Malkin, getting Fleury, getting Sidney Crosby, but they're going to have to stink for a couple seasons before their next mini dynasty kind of sprouts up. In 2029, I got the Nashville Predators. Similar thought process here, and especially after what they did this offseason, I think Barry Trotz admitted that this core, by going out and getting 34-year-old Jonathan Marchessault, 34-year-old Steven Stamkos, Stamkos. He's saying we're going to be going balls to the wall for the next 2 to 3 years, and then we're probably going to have to rebuild pretty heavily because you look at it, Ryan O'Reilly's also 33 years old. Gustav Nyquist is like 32. Roman Yossi's 34 years old. So this team has a very clear 3, maybe 4 years of being a high-level team until basically all of their players are outside of their prime. Even their high-impact young guys are Philip Forsberg, 28 or 29 years old, UC Soros, 29 years old. So in looking at it, I think they're going to be highly competitive the next 2 to 3 years, but then slowly enter it. And although I think their prospect pool is about middle of the pack, they don't really have any blue-chip guys right now that are going to be able to come up and fully be franchise guys to replace the guys that are going to be falling out of their prime. So I think by 2029, we're going to have to see some type of full rebuild by the Nashville Predators. 2030, the Washington Capitals. Previously, I did this video like last year, and I had them 2027 or 2028 being the worst team in the NHL. But after what they did this offseason, it's clear that even once Ovechkin breaks the goal record, it appears like they're trying to be a competitive team for the next 4 or 5 seasons by getting a guy like PLD, by hopefully signing a Jacob Chikrin once they traded for him, getting some type of extension. They were pretty aggressive. So I think at some point they're going to have to go through some type of decent rebuild. I'm not sure the prospect pool is good enough right now to replace the current crop of players. Like when John Carlson starts to age out, Ovechkin's already showing some signs of regression. Dylan Strome is pretty good, but he also is like 27 years old. So in looking at this, I think the Washington Capitals are going to be a decent team, not really a contender, but a solid team for the next couple years. Until Ovechkin retires, they're going to try to be competitive, probably up until the 2027-2028 season, and then they're probably going to have to switch things up and go into some type of a rebuild. In 2031, the Tampa Bay Lightning will be going through a rebuild. You look at it, Victor Hedman's 34 years old. They just traded for Ryan McDonough, who's around the same age. Vasilevsky's 30. He's not that young anymore. Nikita Kucherov's 31, going to be 32 at the start of next season. They're old. They're pretty old. And again, this is 2031. I think they're still going to be a good team the next 2 to 3 years, but then there's going to be a decent drop off. And I think they're going to be smart to kind of let players walk, not akin to a Steven Stamkos where they're still competitive, but more so like, we're going to trade you for assets. You're better off going to an actual contender compared to just wasting the final years where you're still a productive player on our team that's not remotely close. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to be proactive in terms of starting some type of rebuild around 2028, 2029. So I have them as the worst team come the 2031 season. 2032, a little bit of a weird pick, but I'm going to go with the St. Louis Blues. I just don't really believe in their vision right now. I don't think they're that good right now, but they're also too good to be tanking, if that makes sense. I usually refer that as no man's land. They have an okay prospect pool. They're okay right now. So I think with the St. Louis Blues, they're just going to trot out this core for the next 4 to 5 years until they realize, this isn't good enough. Unless Snuggerud really pops off, Dvorsky turns into a fantastic first liner. I think they're just meandering in the middle of nowhere right now for the next 3 to 4 years, and then they're going to realize that we got to hit the reset button. We probably should have fully hit the reset button after we traded all our guys at the 2022-2023 season. I know Robert Thomas and Kyrou were both emerging, but those guys aren't the top two players on a legit contender. So I'm a little bit pessimistic on the Blues in terms of just being an average team for a couple years, and I think at some point they're going to have to hit the reset button by 2029, 2030 and kind of enter an actual proper rebuild where they can maybe build back and be a legit team come the late 2030s. I can't believe I'm talking about the goddamn late 2030s. It's absurd, but this video is kind of absurd. 2033, my New York Islanders. When looking at them, a lot of their best players, Matt Barzal, 27 years old, Horvat, 29. Dobson is kind of young at 24 years old. Sorokin's 28 or 29. But yeah, I think most of their guys are signed for the next 7-8 years. So I think we're just going to run it out for the next 6-7 years and then kind of be like, now we have to rebuild. Lou Lamoriello will hopefully be out of there by then. I think he'd be 88 years old. Anything's possible with that guy, but I think we're just going to let the Barzal, Dobson kind of core fully run its way out. Maybe Cole Eiserman pans out, but even in this is 9 years from now, so there's still a long term. Even in 9 years, he'll it'll be what, 29, 27 years old. So in looking at it, I think that eventually this team's going to need a rebuild of nuclear fashion, considering we have a non-existent prospect pool right now, and most of the players are past the age of 26 at this point. So I think by 2033, it's going to be a nuclear rebuild on the island. And then lastly, I got the Florida Panthers. Similar logic here. Most of their core is between the ages of 25 to 30. I think they're going to be a contender for the next 5 years for sure. And then maybe they just re-sign their guys and let them run it out. And by 2034, Alexander Barkov will be 38. Kachuk will be 36. Ekblad, 37 or something like that. So in looking at it, they're going to have to hit the reset button, and rightfully so. Their Stanley Cup champions might even get another one at some point. So I think by 2034, a full decade from now, they're going to be at the bottom of the NHL. But yeah, here's the full graphic. I'll throw it up right now. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this absolutely absurd list? Who do you think is still going to be competitive come the early 2030s? And I'll be seeing you in the next one.